A group of monks reached a tiny village in Amdo region of Tibet in search of something. When they arrived at Lhamo Thondup's house, they sensed they were very close to their goal, but this needed to be verified. They placed a few old items before the 2-year-old Lhamo Thondup, and the toddler carefully picked up a few of these items. Little did the boy realize that his life was going to change forever. The monks bowed down before the boy. They had accomplished their mission. They had found the 14th Dalai Lama. The story didn't end here. In fact, it was the beginning of a long-drawn struggle, the struggle against the Chinese occupation of Tibet. During the 1959 Tibetan uprising, he made a dramatic escape to India and continues to spread the message of love, compassion, and peace. The Dalai Lama is the spiritual head of Tibet, and the Tibetans respect him as a living god. He is the face of a nonviolent campaign for democracy and freedom in Tibet. He travels around the world and gives sermons on ethics, compassion, nonviolence, peace, and religious harmony. The whole world loves him, but China disparages him as a wolf in the garb of a monk. He is a votary of peaceful coexistence of tradition and modern science. He even has a Twitter handle, but he doesn't follow anyone. The world follows him. The fascinating story of the 14th Dalai Lama begins from the time of his birth. He was born Lhamo Thondup on July 6, 1935, into a farming region in the Taktser village of Amdo region in Tibet. The 13th Dalai Lama had passed away in 1933, so the search for the next Dalai Lama had begun. According to the Tibetan traditions, the new Dalai Lama is the reincarnation of the previous Dalai Lama. It is believed that after his death, the previous Dalai Lama reincarnates himself through rebirth. The Panchen Lama, the second most venerated person in Tibetan traditions, guides the search team tasked with finding the next Dalai Lama. One night, the 9th Panchen Lama saw a dream. Guided by tradition, he interpreted the dream and formed a search party to find the next Dalai Lama. And his team found their next Dalai Lama in the 2-year-old Lhamo Thondup in the Taktser village. The next Dalai Lama had been identified, but this was only one part of the mission. The danger from China loomed large on the horizon. If the Chinese came to know that the boy was the next Dalai Lama, they would insist on sending a large army escort with him, which would then stay in Lhasa and refuse to budge. To make matters worse, the boy and his family were held for ransom by Ma Bufang, a powerful Chinese warlord. To avoid Chinese involvement, the party paid a ransom to the warlord and secured their release. The party then began their epic journey to Lhasa. As soon as the caravan traveled out of Ma Bufang's area, the boy was officially declared to be the 14th Dalai Lama. After a long and tiring journey of 10 weeks, the party finally reached Lhasa on October 8, 1939. For Lhamo Thondup, arrival in Tibet meant an end to his childhood. The boy was given a new name, Tenzin Gyatso. His life had changed completely. When kids his age stay in warmth and care of their parents, the 5-year-old Tenzin Gyatso was lodged in a palace, far away from his family, his home, and his village. The little boy felt lonely, as he rarely got to see his parents and had no contact with children of his own age. There was only one close acquaintance, his elder brother, Lobsang Samden. But he had no choice. He was no ordinary kid. He was the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. At age 5, his spiritual and religious education began. His education centered on spiritual and religious matters. Yet, he was deeply fascinated by science and technology. As time passed by, his curiosity to know how things work increased. He was particularly fond of watches and clocks. He loved to disassemble and reassemble them. He acquired the skills of a professional watchmaker. People would actually leave their watches for repair work. While the Dalai Lama was busy with his education, the geopolitics of the region was changing fast. A new power had emerged on the horizon, Mao's Communist Party. They had managed to drive away Chiang Kai-shek's Kuomintang and established the People's Republic of China on October 1, 1949. Mao now set his eyes on Tibet, and the Chinese army invaded Tibet in October 1950 and declared it as a Chinese territory. The Dalai Lama was supposed to assume political role on his 18th birthday, but this crisis forced the Tibetan government to give him full authority at just 15. With no political experience and little knowledge of the outside world, the Dalai Lama stared at an uncertain future. On May 23, 1951, a Tibetan delegation in Beijing signed a 17-point agreement which ceded control of Tibet to China. China promised to keep the autonomy of Tibet intact, but it was a promise Mao had no intention of keeping. Chinese troops marched into Lhasa. On September 9, 1951, the PLA went on to brutally suppress every upheaval in Tibet, and the condition kept worsening. The Dalai Lama still harbored hope. In 1954, he traveled to Beijing to meet Mao, Zhou Enlai, and Deng Xiaoping to get concessions for Tibet. He stressed that Tibet would stay under Chinese suzerainty if China honestly implemented the 17-point agreement. He also insisted that China should respect Tibet's culture, but Mao laughed off the suggestion and said, "Dalai Lama, religion is opium. It poisons people. I will clean this poison from Tibet and Mongolia." Dalai Lama now fully understood what lay ahead. In February 1959, despite the turmoil and chaos, the Dalai Lama sat for his examination. By March 1959, there were rumors that China had planned to assassinate the Dalai Lama. Tibetans started gathering around his palace, and soon it began to take the form of an uprising. A difficult decision was to be taken. His advisors, including the Nechung Oracle, advised him to leave. On the morning of March 17th, the Dalai Lama took the most difficult decision of his life, a decision that would displace a leader from his people and a young man from his homeland. Disguised as a Chinese soldier, the Dalai Lama escaped under the cover of darkness. Accompanied by a small group consisting of his family and teachers, and escorted by guerrilla fighters, he began his journey, the journey to an uncertain future. It was extremely difficult, as they not only had to escape the eyes of the Chinese troops, but also negotiate a treacherous and unforgiving terrain. After 14 days of difficult journey, the party finally managed to cross over to India, their second home. The whole world waited, with bated breath, till the Dalai Lama reached India. Until then, many thought that the news of his death would come any time. Upon reaching India, the Dalai Lama and other Tibetans were offered asylum. In April 1959, the Dalai Lama and his followers were welcomed by Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru at Mussoorie. The Dalai Lama later moved to Dharamshala, and he set up the government of Tibet in exile in MacLeod Ganj, Dharamshala. It is often referred to as Little Lhasa. Post his escape to India, the land he left behind was ravaged by the Chinese army. Hundreds of thousands died, and almost all of Tibet's monasteries were destroyed. The Cultural Revolution further attacked the Tibetan culture. Keeping a picture of the Dalai Lama was banned in China. The Dalai Lama's nonviolent and peaceful struggle for freedom of Tibet was recognized by the Nobel Prize Committee, and he was honored with the Nobel Peace Prize in 1989. Time magazine named him one of the children of Mahatma Gandhi and Gandhi's spiritual heir to nonviolence. The Tibetans who followed the Dalai Lama into India always hoped that they would return to their motherland, but sadly it never happened. More than 6 decades have passed since the Dalai Lama escaped to India, and despite several rounds of talks between the representatives of the Dalai Lama and the Chinese establishment, there is no ray of hope for the Tibetans. Tibet remains firmly under the thumb of Beijing, and their cultural and religious freedom is under attack by the communist government. For the Tibetans in exile, the biggest challenge is to keep their Tibetan identity intact. While his struggle for the cause of Tibet continues, the Dalai Lama has become a personification of compassion, kindness, love, forgiveness, and empathy. He is considered an embodiment of an entire civilization, a true citizen of the world. China brands him a separatist, but the Dalai Lama says, "We want a meaningful autonomy for Tibet, which must protect our culture, language, and religion under China's rule." It is an irony that the man who has been honored with citizenships of so many countries is far away from his homeland. Unlike most of the religious and spiritual leaders, he doesn't follow any teaching blindly. He adds, "If some teaching goes against reason, we should not accept it." This includes the institution of the Dalai Lama itself. To him, the institution appears feudal in nature, and he feels it should be up to the Tibetan people to decide. In the new millennium, he surprised the world with something no one could have ever predicted. He started discussing about a democratic way of selection of leaders, instead of following the centuries-old tradition. China continues to commit atrocities on Tibetans, but the Dalai Lama says, "I don't harbor any hatred against them. They will reap what they are sowing. I sympathize with them." While the institution of the Dalai Lama and the cause of the Tibetan people head towards an uncertain future, Tenzin Gyatso's legacy of love, compassion, and tolerance will continue to give peace a chance for centuries to come. We now know quite a lot about the 14th Dalai Lama, yet there are a few interesting tidbits about the spiritual leader that we would like to share with you. Where does the Dalai Lama live now? The Dalai Lama resides at Dharamshala, India. Is the Dalai Lama vegan? The Dalai Lama is a non-vegetarian. Meat forms a part of his diet once or twice a week, and the rest of his days, he lives as a vegetarian. While traveling, he does eat meat dishes when offered by his hosts. Why is the Dalai Lama seen as an evil in China? Dalai Lama is portrayed as an evil by the Chinese government and media because of his struggle against the Chinese occupation of Tibetan. He wants China to respect Tibet's autonomy and let its culture flourish, which the Chinese have methodically suppressed over the last 60 years. What do Chinese people think of the Dalai Lama? The Chinese government calls the Dalai Lama a wolf in monk's garb. Majority of the Chinese toe the same line, as the media is state-controlled and people's perception is shaped largely by the story what the communist government dishes out. Where and how did the Dalai Lama receive his education? The Dalai Lama began his education at the age of 6 and completed the doctorate of Buddhist philosophy at age 25. He appeared in the preliminary examination at the monastic universities of Drepung, Sera, and Ganden. He studied Buddhist philosophy, Sanskrit, Tibetan culture, and also memorized Buddhist scripture. What is the philosophy of the 14th Dalai Lama? Forgiveness and compassion for all living beings are the two pillars of the 14th Dalai Lama's teachings. Please like and subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to get more such inspiring videos.